All right, let's jump right in. We're going to be exploring one of the most influential books of the 20th century, Alcoholics Anonymous, what most people just call the Big Book. Now, we're not here to break down the program itself, but to really understand the powerful story that's told inside its pages. How it defined a problem, came up with a pretty radical solution, and ended up launching a movement that spread all over the world. And that story, it starts in a really, really dark place. This quote comes straight from the co-founder, Bill Wilson, talking about his own experience. This isn't some abstract idea. It's a raw, personal cry from the depths of what he called a bitter morass of self-pity. That feeling of complete hopelessness, that's the emotional bedrock the entire book is built on. So to really get the solution the book offers, you first have to understand how it defined the problem. And back in the 1930s, this was a totally new way of looking at it. And this is where the book just flips the script. It doesn't talk about a weak will or some kind of moral failing. No, it calls it a hopeless condition and insidious insanity. The big idea here is that for a certain kind of person, their mind becomes totally powerless to stop them from taking that first drink, no matter how bad the consequences are. See, the problem isn't just the drinking. It's the obsession of the mind that comes before it. And to show you just how invisible this problem could be, the book introduces us to a guy named Fred. On the outside, he's the picture of success. He's got the great job, the perfect family. Everybody loves him. But on the inside, he's a mess. He's panicked, he's ashamed of his jitters, and he's nowhere close to admitting he has a problem. This story was so important because it showed that this wasn't just some guy on Skid Row. It could be your successful, respectable neighbor. And this is the bottom. This is the end of the line in Bill's story. After all the success, all the fighting, all the trying to control it, he hits this wall. And the book argues that this moment of total surrender and admitting you are completely beaten, well, that's not the end. That's the essential first step to getting anywhere. And from that point of just utter despair, the whole narrative pivots. Suddenly there's a glimmer of hope, where it seemed like there was just a solid brick wall. And the solution didn't come from anywhere you'd expect. The book is really clear. The doctors had given up on him. Religion hadn't worked. The big breakthrough was something so simple and yet so revolutionary. One alcoholic who'd gotten better, just sharing his story with another one who was still in the thick of it. This idea, the healing power of one person helping another, that's the engine for the entire movement. I mean, you can just feel the shock and the hope in this line, can't you? Bill Wilson is talking about his friend, Ebby, sitting right there in his kitchen. For someone who felt totally doomed, seeing a person just like him who was now sober and okay, well, that wasn't just an idea. It was a living, breathing miracle. It made the impossible seem possible. So you might be wondering, how does this huge change actually happen? Well, the book has a term for it, a vital spiritual experience. And it's really careful to say this isn't necessarily about a religious conversion. It's about a deep internal shift, a psychic change so powerful that it can actually break that mental obsession. The key is the experience, not a specific belief system. Okay, so we've got the problem and the turning point. But how do you actually get there? How do you have that psychic change? Well, the book then lays out what it calls a design for living. Before they even get to the steps, the book points its finger at one thing: self-centeredness. This actor metaphor is just so perfect. The alcoholic is like an actor who wants to be the writer, the director, and the star of the whole show. And when other people don't read their lines right, it leads to anger, fear, and self-pity, which of course are the very things that make them want to drink. The solution starts with firing yourself as the director of the universe. And this is the toolkit they offer to make that change happen. The 12 steps are laid out as this really practical program of action for what they call personal house cleaning. You start by admitting defeat, then you find a higher power of your own understanding, and then you do the hard work, a deep moral inventory, admitting where you were wrong and cleaning up the wreckage of your past. It all wraps up with a commitment to keep growing and, crucially, to help other people. It's a total overhaul. And this line, this was an absolute game changer at the time. The book says it over and over. We mean your own conception of God. That phrase, as we understood him, blew the doors wide open. It made the whole spiritual side of things accessible to anyone, agnostics, atheists, people of any faith or no faith at all. It took away a huge roadblock and was totally key to its success. So we've been talking about the individual's journey, right? But the story doesn't stop there. It goes on to describe what happens when a bunch of these people start taking these actions together. And here's the proof in the pudding. By 1939, when the first edition of this book came out, it wasn't just a bunch of theories. It was presented as the collected story of how the first 100 men and women had actually recovered from something that everyone said was hopeless. This shipwreck metaphor they use, it's just perfect, isn't it? It captures the kind of bond that formed between them. This wasn't some social club. The book talks about it like the deep camaraderie of survivors. They had all been on this same sinking ship, and they found a lifeboat together. That shared experience created this incredibly powerful fellowship that nobody on the outside could really understand. And this slide really shows you what a wild mix of people this was. The book makes a point of saying these were people who normally would not mix. You had folks from every walk of life, different politics, different religions, rich, poor. The only thing they had in common was that they shared the same deadly problem and were now practicing the same solution. Which brings us to the last piece of the story. Why a book? Why go to all the trouble of putting this down on paper? What was the mission? Well, the founders realized pretty quickly they couldn't possibly go out and meet every single alcoholic in the world. So the big book was their answer. It was designed to be their message in a bottle, a way to get the program into the hands of anyone, anywhere, especially someone who's totally isolated and might never get the chance to meet another sober alcoholic face-to-face. And right from the get-go, the book lays down this core principle. Anonymity wasn't about being ashamed or secretive. It was a really practical and spiritual idea to make sure that egos and personalities didn't get in the way of the message. It kept the work as an avocation, something you do for love, not money, and it stopped individuals from trying to get famous or profit from their recovery. The main text of the book ends with these simple, hopeful words. It's not a command, it's not a promise that life will be easy, it's just a blessing for the road ahead. And it just perfectly captures that earnest, person-to-person tone that made this book so different and so powerful. A message in a bottle sent out in 1939 that's still washing up on shores all around the world today.